group of us here watching.
Excellent. Dan, did you want to wait?
I just want to say congratulations, Rudolph, on everything, and you know what I mean. But thank you,
Thanks.
Goff the Great, and we are all very, very enthusiastically sitting on this end.
Ditto. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and share. I've already started recording, I believe. Yeah, I've already started recording. So,
Perfect.
So we'll just wait until. Do you want to wait, Dan, until Michael shows up, or do you want us to just?
No, let's just go.
Okay, so before we get into this, obviously, some of you are new faces, and I believe Dan and I talked about wanting to do just a quick intro. So, Chris, if you want to start, go ahead.
Sure. Hey there, my name's Chris Goff. Tori and I have known each other for several years through a mutual acquaintance, a friend, and I've worked together on a few different projects in the past. But my background, roughly, or the Cliff Notes version, is I spent a long time in representation in Hollywood. I worked at a very large entertainment agency called Creative Artists Agency, CAA. They represent everyone for everything, from licensing to marketing to Fortune 500 companies to A-list actors and actresses, music, you name it. I had different hats while I worked there. I did everything from actually representing specific talent to representing companies to representing brands that wanted to have natural auxiliary extensions from who they were in getting into other media. I did all of that. I represented sports people, adventure sports, stick and ball sports as well. I was at the agency for the better part of 11 or so years and left because I needed to focus efforts and energies in other directions. But having said that, while I was there, I did a lot of different deal making and packaging, if you will, from putting literally hundreds of TV shows together to be sold, from putting other independent projects and movies together, from, as I just said, actually representing physical talent, and other licensing and publishing deals alike. So I have a vast familiarity with a lot of different ecosystems within media, branding, and entertainment, and have also represented Fortune 500 companies as it relates to agendas within media and entertainment. After I left CAA, I did a lot of my own personal consulting work along the same lines I just outlined that I did at the agency, as well as getting my feet wet and doing some natural resource work down in New Zealand for a number of years with a large water company I started, and then coming back here to the States and doing some other one-off projects around different other entertainment entities. So hopefully that helps.
Perfect. So a little bit about me, Tori Keyes. My background is also in entertainment, although in a very different capacity than Chris. I started in the music business, working for one of the biggest artist management firms in the country, ended up accidentally becoming a television producer for a bunch of shows on a bunch of networks, accidentally moved to LA, started working on a bunch of movies, ran a couple of production departments for a couple of Emmy award-winning shops, then worked at a music tech startup that's very similar to what Spotify is now. We were just before our time. Learned the ad side of the business, ended up creating my own digital marketing agency that I ran for over 10 years, and serviced A-list celebrities, specialized in launching products and launching movies and TV shows, working with distributors in every major studio, as well as Fortune 500 companies and down to small mom and pops. So marketing, promotion was my niche for a while. As you can see, I'm getting my MBA. I have 1 semester left before I'm done. So we can thank USC for this Zoom call. At least my tuition is going to something great. I'm just kidding. So what we put together here, we've been tasked as a part of this process to take these 4 books that represent King Adam and what Chris and I like to call the War for Humanity, and turn it into a representation of what we feel it could be in the media as far as telling a story and building what we like to call the Dionysian cinematic universe. You won't see as much stuff about Dionysus in this particular presentation because the books were really heavily about the war and the battles that were going on as a part of the books. So we really focused on a limit. You'll see when we get to the story map how this plays out. So this presentation is really about these 4 books that we were tasked to put together a content Bible for and a concept of how we could take this to market. The first half, especially probably helpful for some of you who may not have read the books, is just the content Bible piece of this equation and goes over kind of just the summary basics of the world and the characters and the overview in the event that you haven't read the book, which will be used greatly for the team, for people in the future who haven't read the book, especially when we're trying to get people on board like showrunners, etc. The second half of the presentation will focus on what we plan to do with it, and then, thirdly, where we go from here. So I'll probably kick off the first part of it and just talk about kind of the overarching view of what the 4 books are and what the world looks like, so that you can start to wrap your mind around this Dionysian cinematic universe. And we start with this first half. We'll go through the background, the books, the characters, the world, and then the second half is where we'll get into the story map and all that stuff. So as part of the introduction, this is the content Bible for the War for Humanity. It's about these 4 books with another book incoming and what this world looks like, which is based on His Majesty King Adam and Dionysus's ecstasy as they fight for the world. So the background on where all this came from: the books were served as inspiration. Their IP is part of the technology. They have this great device that allows you to travel interdimensionally and beat these reptilians who are trying to feed off of the evil deeds that humanity creates, and inspiring them to go towards that side of their character more so than the good side of the character. And Team America has our lobbyist hero, King Adam. He's the only person who can pilot this interdimensional spaceship in his free time, waging war against the reptilians, which has been continuing for the last 700,000 years, unbeknownst to humans. King Adam is a part of this alliance of light, made up of various alien species who, funnily, in the books don't really like humans very much, but they do have a vested interest in our success. So we're thankful for that, I think. And then we connect the dots from the past. So, all of the individuals involved in this story in real life are some representative of some reincarnated spirit from the past, be it a public figure, an icon, or a deity. Our hero, for example, is King Adam, as in the reincarnated spirit of Adam from the biblical Adam and Eve. His wife is Eve. Lucifer makes an appearance. We've got other Greek mythological characters like Zeus and Dionysus, and they're all together in this really interesting story, moving towards human ascension.
I'll just pop in before Tori goes on to just housekeeping. The imaging, the artwork, the aesthetic, these are all just kind of where Tori and I went. It's nothing meant to have to continue. It's just a
Or final.
placeholder. Yeah, or a final. This is just a placeholder for today for purposes of this call, this presentation. And really what I've been telling Tori is where I think Tori and I got is we were able to construct the proverbial table with 4 legs that we all can now sit around and have a conversation around what these books as they were written mean. So if that table changes, if it's another color, if it has to look different in the future, that's fine. But at least we have pinpointed a place of aggregation to have this conversation that can be fluid as things move forward. So just want to say all of this is sort of a stab in the dark from Tori and I as to how to represent this. None of it is meant to be exhaustive or, written in stone, so to speak.
It's really just to help give a vibe of where we went with it creatively.
Right.
It's very cool. The pictures so far are very cool.
Good.
Well, buckle up. They get better.
So in addition to the alliance, King Adam is a part of the Masonic Order of Dionysus, which worships Dionysus, the Greek god and son of Zeus. We have the full support of the Masonic Order to launch a campaign and be a part of this ecosystem, which I think lends, when we get to the marketing component, a big part of where we end up going with this. So the books themselves, there's 4 books done. One is Adam's War for Ecstasy. We call all of them internally, which doesn't have to stick, but Adam's War for Humanity. And it essentially it covers King Adam's presence on the scene, where he takes over this 700,000-year war between the reptilians and the Alliance of Light over humanity and humanity's ascension and where humanity goes. So we pick up in Adam's War for Ecstasy, where he uncovers the truth about the Shadow War. We learn about the reptilians. We learn about their dark matter grid that they've put over the earth, and that the dark matter grid is how they feed off of fear and violence and hatred and lies and mistruths and all of the bad things about society. And so we see in that particular book, Adam dominate, clear out the reptilians from Earth, and begin to, change the shape of the war. The second book is so the first book is kind of a war of secrets, right? It's all these secret things about humanity that we don't know about, but that's going on underneath the surface. The second book is really a book more about redemption. It's a continuation of what happened in the first book, moving from cleaning up the earth and all of the dark matter grid and all the reptilians to working on the solar system. And then most importantly, King Adam is married to and loves Eve. And Eve, in this particular situation, ever since she ate the apple, has been in cahoots with his satanic majesty. And they've kind of had this pact of whoever wins the war will lobby for the other one to come be in the circle of winning. And so and King Adam knows this, and he's winning the war, and he fights for the redemption of Eve's soul so that she can continue to be there, even at great peril for his own existence and suffering and life questioning experiences. And he goes against what everyone tells him in the alliance because he loves his forever wife, Eve. Then we move into the war against evil, which is against his satanic majesty, the one who's, architecting all these dark matter beings and feeding off of all this fear and hatred. And we see him, ready to kill his satanic majesty. And then his daughter pleads to save him. She feels like there's something redeeming about him, just like there was with Eve. So he locks him in a prison off in the far ether of the universe and tries to save him, and ultimately does. And he memorializes his surrender in song, and sends it to Dionysus. And there's some really interesting play here where in all of humanity, Dionysus and his satanic majesty were in cahoots together against humanity. And in Dionysus Revealed, you kind of learn that King Adam has always been opposed to all of them in all of his incarnations. But finally, with God the Father's, the meeting of the Council of Light, they figure out that it's time to get on the sides of humans. It's time for them to ascend. And it's really up to Dionysus to choose whether or not humans continue to exist or whether they don't. And so ultimately Dionysus chooses the sides of the humans and everyone else falls into place. And now we're focusing on helping ascend, which is where the fifth book is currently being written, which is as Ascension Protocols for humanity in the future. And these are just key events for each of the books. I'm not going to go into them because we don't need to, I summed up what the books are about. You can read all
But you
of
guys can see a version of formatting here that could be useful in a longer
Yeah.
theme Bible. So these are
Mhm.
just,
Yeah.
this is just a fractional representation of what something like this could look like in an extended form, as Tori will flip through several slides here.
Exactly. So, in the War for Ecstasy, we see this is the book with the most events, I think. In the biggest battle, the Dark Side of the Moon, which was kind of that pivotal moment where King Adam jumps from juvenile rookie trying to figure out how to pilot this great device armada into being a veteran pilot and really coming into his own and really kind of saving the day. In the War for Eve, this is really all about the continuation of the war, Eve's soul and acceptance. We see the war against HSM, which is all about, getting him to surrender. We see Dionysus revealed, and in this book, we learn a lot about Dionysus and his history and his impact on humanity, what he thinks, and mostly about ecstasy and why ecstasy, which is the title of the first book, which is all about, this idea that ecstasy can overcome all of this dark matter and is a key to humans' ascension, which is why the Masonic Order plays a big role in the future of this campaign and taking it to market. Ascension Protocols. One of the key things here, and this is a key component of the future campaign that I really want to point out, is that when humans ascend, because King Adam went and healed all the planets and helped a lot of the other planets and their planetary beings ascend already, Earth will be the last in the solar system to ascend. And when that happens, it will unlock a 12th dimension living library, which gives access to the Akkadian records, which is a record of all of human history. And so this is really all about the one who seeks the truth, which is a key component of how we're building this universe. This universe is to take advantage of the momentum that there's a lot of people out in the world who know that there's truths out there that is being hidden from them, and that they want to be able to understand it, know it, and be a part of it. And that's a key part of where we go from here. So characters, again, I'm not going to get in too deep into this, but obviously you have King Adam, you have Eve, you have God the Father, creator of the universe, aka Zeus. You have Dionysus, God of ecstasy, God of wine. You have his satanic majesty. You have the Alliance of Light, which is a group of alien species helping humans, part Arturian, part Pleiadian, and I believe there are some other species, but it's mostly the Pleiadians and Arturians that are spoken about in the books, as outlined here. The Arturians are great shipbuilders. They're small and hive mind. The Pleiadians are humanoid-like species from the Pleiades. You've got the reptilians, which are these scary reptilian evil beings. These super cis, which are like the dark forces, special forces of the reptilians, who only come out when all the other reptilians have met their doom and they're now the last force, and they die anyway because King Adam is really good at what he does. We have the One, who is the only known reptilian defector. He defected before he was born, and the split second before he was born, which you're not supposed to be able to do, but he did. And so he fights side by side with King Adam in his pursuits, and is pivotal in that arena. We have the Supreme Reptilian Commander, who's kind of in the early days a key component of the reptilian resistance. You have these black, and then we get into some of the beings. You've got these black feathered gods, which provide intel. All of these beings that are referenced here, and these aren't all the characters in the book because there's a bajillion. These are just kind of some of the key species and or characters and or components of the story. Each of these merge with King Adam and give some type of assistance to King Adam as a part of being merged interdimensionally. The black feather gods provide great intel. The white feathered beings, they were unfortunately a species that was thought to be wiped out when tranquility was broken and jumps were down to only a minute long, and King Adam couldn't go and save them. And ultimately, we end up finding that they get recovered at a later time, but it was sad for a little while for the white feathered beings. Queen Okawokowi, she's one of the most badass warrior queens that exists. We've got Nira, Queen of the Blue People, both of which are King Adam's wives, by the way. And there's a really fun interplay about, you know, how many relationships can you have interdimensionally. We've got God the Mother referenced, but not a whole lot is known. I think that's something that I personally put in there because I want to make sure that we explore that. There's not a lot of female characters, and I think that we should continue to explore and deep dive into some of the other female characters. We've got the Maenads, of course, who are nymphs and supporters of Dionysus, and take care of him, nurse him, care for him. The planets, every planet is a being and has its own personality. Every planet has its own main planetary species, like the Uranians on Uranus. And then you have, of course, other species on top of those planets, just like Earth. We've got blue people, you know, green people, and humans. So the planetary species, I love the sun cats as one of the best examples, so I use them. They're from Venus, and they're like big cats that like to play. So this is the world and what it looks and feels like. We've got Earth. The reptilians have placed a dark matter energy grid around the Earth. It feeds off the Earth and sends all the dark matter to the moon. There's also these keels that orbit off planet that supply it throughout the universe, especially the solar system. These reptilians have underground bases and parallel universes where they keep this dark matter flowing. And lots of on-planet species, millennia old, who've been affected by this dark matter, including entire universes that are completely dead as a result. The Great Device is what King Adam pilots. It was created by the Arturians. Only King Adam can operate it because it's tied to his DNA, fueled by ecstasy from Dionysus, specifically the music that he plays. It suffered from tax and capacity problems as a result of the war. But ultimately, those shortened jumps ultimately created a better, more efficient King Adam. So, you know, down to a minute, 3 minutes, but I think that it worked out. So then there's the aspect of dimensions. There's 12 dimensions in this universe. We exist in the 3rd dimension. Fell from 5th because of the apple and the reptilians. The Armada and many of King Adam's jumps are in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th dimension. The 12th dimension is where ascended beings go when they're ready to just go have fun and live heaven, basically. The solar system is made up of 9 planets, including Pluto. All the planets have personalities and native beings, as we talked about. They also have unique aspects to each of them. For example, you know, the sun is what he uses to harness all the dark matter energy. The Neptunians have really interesting sound components to their world that allow for healing. And each of these planets, as King Adam has gone through and healed them, have given him gifts to help continue to heal the world and the universe as a whole as he does his job. And then there's a really interesting aspect where we go into parallel universes, where every universe has this group of parallel universes, and they all have dimensions and multiple timelines, and these timelines are affected by other timelines. And time travel and dimensionality are really important concepts in this world that we're building, that I think is something that a lot of people are beginning to open up to and be really excited by, especially as the field of quantum mechanics continues to open up. So this is a really exciting aspect of the story that I think could be really interesting and telling. So here we are at the story map portion where we kind of plan out how we tackle the story. There's one thing before I kind of turn it over to Chris and let him tackle some of the rest of this. If you look at this map on the side, there's a key component. Like, as you can see, this current IP visibility, the War for Humanity is a small blip in time when you look at this story linearly, right? In the past, we still have to answer for all the aliens, where they came from, what this 700,000 war is about. We have to answer to gods and mythology, even though a lot of Greek mythology is in superhero movies and touches on. It's really not well known in society, and certainly not in what they're teaching people today. And there's a lot of human history and ancient knowledge that is just beginning to come to awareness. And these are all things that can continue to be explored in the content in the future, as we continue to build this content Bible outside of the current IP that we're talking about now. So we touch on it slightly, and we've created some extra options to think about, but there's this whole world that we could dive into, which is why we view this as a Dionysian cinematic universe, right? The present is all about touching on Dionysus and ecstasy. That's a key component we have to teach people. Dionysus, intentionally, to my understanding, per King Adam, has avoided from Dionysus really being covered in media and pop culture. We have to remedy that in order for the story to be told. So we have to continuously kind of educate the public on who Dionysus is. And same thing with Prince Imran. So eventually when we reveal that Prince Imran is this incarnation of Dionysus, then it makes sense because people know who Dionysus is. We also need to touch on the science and technology components of dimensions and time travel, parallel universes, because there are, well, it's a continuously advancing subject. Not everybody knows about it. So we need to help educate. So I see this in 6 major phases in how we plan on breaking out the story. The first phase is in setting the stage. So we've got to take whatever is important in the past or in the present that we need people to understand. We need to make them aware of it. So these could be things like Zeus and the Titans, the Dionysus origin story, God versus Satan, HSM and Dionysus connecting and being against humans, the Adam and Eve origin story, and the aliens' entrance on Earth. Those are preamble pieces of this world that can be built out in the future. And whatever pieces need to be told, I think Dionysus is one of those pieces, should be seeded through content, and we can talk about that. We haven't put that in here. Chris and I have developed ideas about that and have thoughts about how to tackle that, but we didn't address it in this content Bible. So then the next most important phase is planting the seed. So the best way that we found to plant the seed for present day events and to prepare for the mass adoption of this particular piece of content is in the creation of a sitcom style series called the Adam Group. It's very much a hidden in plain sight series. Think of it like The Office or Workaholics. It's very funny and comedic, and it's really based off of what the real world version of this story is. We have a lobbyist who at a young age ends up becoming a remote viewer and working with these top 3-letter agencies and wages this war in his spare time against multiple dimensions. So think of it a little bit like Men in Black, a little bit like Deadpool, a little bit like The Office and or Workaholics. And the funny part is it's funny because you can play off of so much of what pop culture already thinks about what pop culture is curious about, while also not giving away the seeds. It's just a really funny take on what would you do, you know, if you saw someone who's this lobbyist, so that you can touch everybody, whether they believe it's true or whether they don't. They can find it entertaining and be interested in it. So 3 is this playing the game. We build the War for Humanity's ecosystem into a game. And we'll talk about this in the next section. Then we do guerrilla marketing, where we utilize the confidential nature of all the information, along with mysterious government info to market the game and to build an audience through the game itself. And think of this like QAnon, seeding and disclosure, conspiracy, partnering with game networks, using Discord, building LARPs. This is all based on building an audience, which gives the Dionysian Cinematic Universe a lot more control, because it already has a base, which is basically, kind of using a more technological approach to what Marvel and DC have done. Then we go through the mass appeal in the way that we launch products, and then we build our ancillary revenue streams from there.
I think what's
So-
important as Tori moves on here and as she'll explain is the game portion of this project, meaning the books and everything that Tori and I are speaking to, is really important, and it gets beyond 3D representation of narrative. So although the Atom Group is a great way to program and to make the general public aware of certain elements and aspects of what Atom, Dionysus, the Order, the narrative is about from a 30,000 foot view, what Tori is about to explain, and as we've gamified, if you will, the prospect of your agenda and of your grand narrative in totality, this will play out and show humanity, or the audience, if you will, that the narrative that the Order wishes to achieve is lacking in the ability for humanity to understand interdimensionality, and this game will go further than 3D reality allows right now, and will start to push people into understanding what interdimensionality actually means through gameplay and through other technologies that are currently unavailable but will be available as we move down the road.
I
Fair
love
enough.
it.
Fair
I
enough.
love it.
Fair enough, Tori.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Good.
was trying to gloss over it so I could get the big punch in, but it's kind of hard to when you're laying out phases. So, but yeah, Chris summed
This
it up.
is the knockout punch for the Order's narrative across all content, whether it's music,
Mhm.
whether it's everything, will be the gamification and the memorialization of aspects of what you are wanting to communicate over the next decade or more. So bear with us as we start to outline what's possible today, knowing that what's going to be possible 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now is going to change and dramatically, alter the landscape as we move on. But I think everyone will be able to get at least a feeling of what we're suggesting and where things could go. So with that, Tori can jump back into.
Yeah. So first we'll talk about the Atom Group, and I think the Atom Group is important to go first before the gamification, because it sets the stage for what is possible. It sets the stage for all of the crazy things, the Arturians and the Pleiadians, things that everyday humans would find crazy, that maybe some conspiracy theorists or QAnon folks or Gaia subscribers may not find that crazy, right? But the Atom Group allows for us to focus on a funny way of setting the stage for what the story is by just saying the story as it is. Here's a lobbyist, finds out he's a remote viewer, and wages this war interdimensionally, and may look like he's at a party, at a rave, on his couch while he's fighting a war for humanity, and you've got these crazy cast of characters, and they're funny and they're interesting, and he's like, King Adam is like Deadpool and the anti-hero, and hates being a hero, and is always at no, and never wants to do anything that the Alliance wants him to do, never wants to do anything that God the Father wants him to do. never wants to do anything the way anybody else wants him to do, and yet here he is saving the world, whether you believe him or not.
Sort of like Bart Simpson,
Yeah.
interdimensional Bart Simpson.
Oh.
So I think the element of comedy here
Oh.
can offset and provide, as Tori has spoken to, a lot of legroom and a lot of equity for us to play around with various narratives that have been some accepted, some rejected, and it doesn't really pigeonhole us into saying that, oh, this is how things actually are or aren't. It's just a fun narrative to introduce the concepts that will be coming later.
It's a very mainstream way of doing it. Think of like Third Rock from the Sun,
Correct.
right? Where you have this alien family who comes and lives, and you might think that it's crazy, but they don't look like aliens. So it's the same thing where you've got this lobbyist who's doing this work, and you get to poke fun at what mainstream conspiracy theorists may think about whatever these topics may be, and then introduce the things that you want to without it being this crazy deep alien show. Like it's meant to be like Workaholics or The Office, with characters like Men in Black, but with the comedy of Deadpool. That's the Atom Group. And it's about his cast of characters fighting the war in an office, trying to figure out how to go interdimensional while they're sitting on their couch looking like they're dancing at a rave. You know, it's meant to be funny. So
It's really funny.
it's I think that it'll be really, I think it'll be a very pivotal show if we do it right.
Fucking hilarious.
So we mapped out this kind of an example of the story arc. So first we meet Adam, we learn about his lobbying efforts, we get introduced to a different side of Washington, which I think is also fun. A side that we haven't seen, you know, the comedic up close and personal side, like what happens when your senator's at a bar, what happens when your senator's at a restaurant, what happens when this crazy lobbyist who's also you know, fighting this war interdimensionally finds out that someone's a reptilian. Like, how does this, you know, it's this really interesting up close and personal side of Washington, D.C. That you can say through King Adam's lens and also through an everyday human's lens, because you get to have that play. So he gets visited by these $3 agencies and tested, and all of a sudden he's a remote viewer. You know, will his friends believe him? Will the viewers? How do you even tell this story, right? How do you even show it? And that's what we get to explore in execution.
And hijinks ensue.
And hijinks ensue. So season 2, we are accustomed to Adam's new life with him as a double agent fighting evil in multiple dimensions. Now we see Adam assembling his ragtag group of the Atom Group and his dimensional demolitioners. That's what I like to call them. We learn about the war against humanity and the absurd situations we see in the 3D world mixed with the comedic, bizarre, you know, multi-dimensional world. And then in season 3, you see how the show can become perennial. So now the war is in full swing, the Atom Group is together, people can come and go, but the audience is understanding the battle that they're seeing playing out. And then we get to watch key battles play out as little seeds that get planted, you know, the war against the reptilians, and then the war for Eve, and the war against HSM, etc., and then ultimately to Ascension. We pulled together characters. Now, these aren't the final characters. We're not saying these have to be the characters. They're just good ideas. We see King Adam, we see his wife Eve. The funny part about Eve is she doesn't know anything about what King Adam's doing, doesn't believe it. She thinks he's crazy. She wants nothing to do with any of it. So anytime he even talks about it, she just leaves the room. She's like, you've lost the plot. You know, then you've got the chosen one, which is his daughter in the womb. She, you know, she's telepathically communicating. And so we get to watch this. We get to watch this family dynamic unravel, because she's kind of very supportive of him. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince, he's very innocent. He tries to jump interdimensionally. He wants to be a part of it, but he's just not there yet, you know, and like he doesn't quite have it. But he tries really hard. And so how does this family of now interdimensional warriors, like, how do they play together? That's an interesting dynamic we get to explore. Then, of course, key character is the one, his reptilian best friend, who battles with him in every battle. You've got the K King, who's this comedian, and you don't know if he's also a lobbyist, and so you don't know whether or not he's gonna interrupt things with a laugh or how he's gonna change the situation. You've got the Supreme Reptilian Commander, who's like the main villain in the story that we see in the third dimension. We've got the Queen Okawokowee, just a few of many crazy alien characters who will be privy and part of the season as it plays out.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah, we feel like it's a really great seed planter for this part, which is the game. And the game was actually inspired by a very small sentence in one of the books where this guy wearing a hood shows up and says, "It's just a game and you've already won." So the idea that we live
That's
in.
the game master. That was the game master.
Yeah, the game master, exactly.
Yeah.
So we have this idea that we're talking about all of this crazy stuff, but what if it's just a game? What if it's just a simulation? And what if everything about this world is real or not? And that's how we play into this audience of people who were really, really interested in finding the truth out about humanity. Whether anything that we say in this game, in these books, in these TV shows is real or not, it is a game for them to figure out what's true and what isn't. And so everything that we build around this game, which is in multiple dimensions of a rollout, is meant to take users on a journey of building their living library and figuring out the truth. And it's meant to go after the people who really do care about trying to find the truth about whatever's going on in the world. So that said, the phases of this game launch start with a LARP, which is a live action role play. If you want any case studies on this, you can look at Harry Styles's first, I think it was his first record, maybe second record release as an example. They took out these ads for this fake island. They filmed this music video on this fake island, and this Discord server blew up because everyone thought it was a live action role play game that they were launching. And all of a sudden you had 50,000 people on a Discord server, not knowing that Harry Styles was putting out a record, and everybody was in and everybody wanted to be a part of it. So our goal and our plan for launch is to start with a live action role play game and to create a Discord channel and a social media channel to drop hints and create a frenzied LARP environment that begins to set the stage for what becomes the game. The second component of that is info drops. So just like QAnon, which was overwhelmingly successful in politics, which could also be really interesting given that our main character in real life is a lobbyist. We can see these information drops on Discord via official social media channels and through Easter egg guerrilla style marketing hunts in real life. And you'll see this in the Lie campaign that comes shortly. But the entire idea here is that we're seeding these info drops and giving people Easter eggs online, on social, and in real life. And what they do with these information drops is they pull this info in and it leads them ultimately to the game. And the game gets launched and the game starts as a regular console game, but will also have a virtual reality and an experiential component to it. And the experiential component to it will be living out these battles from the War of Humanity, but built out as quests. And so each quest is designed for every human to be able to live their own version of being King Adam. And the info drops that they get from Discord and from LARP and from guerrilla marketing tactics all feed into their ability to achieve these quests successfully and to find out the truth. Are they right or are they wrong? The entire thing is a game, all of it.
I'd add here too, much of what Tori's describing here in terms of rolling this out, if you go back in time it probably started in earnest. And one of still the best examples was the marketing campaign and rollout for the movie AI that Spielberg directed many years ago. And probably the newest version of it is what she just outlined with Harry Styles.
District 13 was also a really good example.
District 13 is also another good example. Yeah, correct.
So this isn't new, it's just the way that we're doing it is new. No one's done, to my knowledge, no one's done an all-encompassing campaign. Harry Styles didn't do it on purpose, he did it on accident. It just happened to work out that a bunch of game players thought it was real, and it built this entire thing.
But what this starts to do is people engage in this and they move through it. They are exposing themselves to the fundamental underpinnings of interdimensionality
Yes,
and its existence.
yes,
Because I don't think most people think about it other than in a scientific sort of sci-fi. I don't even know what to make of that. I can't comprehend it.
especially the gameplay in the 3D experience and the VR experience is meant to help them understand that in a tangible, experiential way that really hasn't been done before. And that's a key component of telling the story, because you give them the chance to think that they're operating this armada too. You give them the chance that they can understand what happened in the War of Humanity in real time. And once you're done telling the War for Humanity, you can go back and deal with all the past, and you can do with the future, just like Star Wars does, right? Where you can do your prequels, you can do your postquels, you can do all of it. A key component of this, and this is really important.
Hey, Tori, I think
Yeah.
that's really important what you just said. Can you repeat that?
I think if I remember what I said,
What about the prequels, Adam?
prequels and postquels.
Yeah, the war. Yeah,
Oh yeah, about experiencing
telling the story of the
war.
war.
Yeah, telling
Yeah.
the story of the war and living it as a player, like as you are King Adam. You get the chance to understand, and as we get into the other components of Dionysus, you'll see how all of this fits in together in one arena. We're talking about one aspect of it right now, but it all comes together, and then it becomes a tool because you're building an audience, and this audience stays with you in perpetuity for as long as they love the game. So as long as you're making quests that are good and you're making it interesting and they're craving the information and the drops that you're giving them, it's something for them to do that's beyond the traditional social media hoopla, and will give you far more interaction and far more involvement than any traditional media property ever could.
Yeah.
And a key component of this is in the captain's logs, which and we'll get to this at the end, but the books are written as jump reports. They're not written as a narrative book, right? And they're jump reports from King Adam's perspective. And it's important that those get shared as informational drops, as captain logs that help them understand their part of the journey in the War for Humanity as they're playing the game and as they're going through their quests.
Right. So the captain's
Wow.
logs,
Wow.
logs get reinstituted into gameplay at strategic moments across 3D time. And we can embed those as we re-edit the captain's logs with
Yes.
encoded information, gematria, all kinds of fun stuff
Easter
that can
eggs.
provide the audience with opportunities to go further and deeper. But we time the release of these captain's logs or the jump reports when we want to push the audience in new directions or expand the offering. So all that's very manipulatable, if that's a word. And we can start to play with that, and have a little bit of fun there.
And
Wow.
everything ultimately gets added to this living library within your game that you have access to, which helps you periodically as part of quests figure out whether or not you're onto the truth or whether you're wrong.
So in some ways, what we're starting with the game is what's available today. But within a few years, you could argue this experience or the engagement within the world that we're creating here on behalf of the Order will start to feel something like, I don't know, maybe the Amazon series Peripheral, if anyone has seen that. this is moving into a place that's going to be extremely dynamic and will start to educate and really inform people as to what interdimensionality and eventually what ascension will mean for them,
Yeah.
presumably.
I've watched all 7 episodes, but yes, I agree.
So, pardon me, I have a cough. I'm gonna let Chris take this over because this is his baby, and
So the idea that came to me when we were talking about this is the marketing campaign is going to be lie, that everyone's been lied to their entire existence. Lie meaning what we know it as well as the acronym that we've created, limited interdimensional experience. So as we market the game and we start telling people, as you've seen here, that Shepard Fairey had done for years with his street art with Obey, or things like Banksy has done in the past, we are going to use the term, the word lie, which translates almost into every language, and will get people's attention, and they will not be able to not think about it. So, and we will be playing on the interdimensionality of that word as well. So the concept that humanity, borrowing from author Graham Hancock, is that we're a species with amnesia, and we've all been lied to about who we are and where we come from, is a salient point. It's also relevant for moving into the future because people are limited in their interdimensional experiences. So as people start to investigate this and they start to understand, I think the concept and marketing effort of just one word will be very powerful.
absolutely. So then
That's a great idea. That's I just keep saying wow, and it's great. But I mean, I'm I'm incredibly impressed, and I love the lie part too.
yeah, it's good. It's really clever on Chris's part. Mass market, we release everything through the game, and we market everything through the game, in addition to traditional means too, but we build the audience. We launch the quest through the game as a part of the information drops to drive traffic. To do that, we strategically launch the books through the game. Obviously, you buy them in regular bookstores. And then once the mass market has been proven, and the graphic novels are a success and the books are a success, we take it to the movies, and we tell the story for the War of Humanity on the big screen. Other IP content ideas that we've come up with, first and foremost, we want to talk about the record label. Obviously, Ecstasy is Dionysus's genius. It's the thing that he provides that's unparalleled to everything else. Integrating what he's doing with the new band and along with any other music that he creates or wants to create can be injected into the game, can be injected into the movies or any other media property, and can also be used to pick other bands that he feels inspired that are providing ecstasy and take more out to the public in different arenas so that it's not just a drain on him. So we use Sub Pop kind of as an example of this kind of ecosystem that we create, because Sub Pop was really good at and notorious at building a brand instead of just building
Yeah, and even before Sub Pop, for those of us that are even older, well, actually Sub Pop is relevant to me, but if you want to go back a couple of decades before that, that was probably the precursor to Sub Pop would be Asylum Records. So
Yeah.
same sort of thinking.
Yeah, same thinking. These are some scripted ideas that we put together. I'll let Chris kind of take
These are just ideas. None of this is set in stone, obviously. The titles don't need to make sense, but you guys can kind of dip into this at your own. But a take on the original film, The Outsiders, or at least the storyline. So it's sort of Stranger Things meets The Outsiders in sort of a real world setting of Euphoria. So it's a contemporary young scripted series playing on the themes, as I just said, of The Outsiders. And in this iteration, the gods or titans of the cosmos in all time have assembled and embodied here on Earth to witness the human experience as they go through ascension. And problems arise and hijinks ensue. But it's elevating and exposing a portion and segment of the population to that type of content and scripted development. Next thing is one called, obviously Cain and Abel. It's sort of a much bigger Game of Thrones meets sort of House of the Dragons meets Man in the High Castle, sort of prehistory sort of narrative. So it's the historical and iconic story of man's first children, and Cain and Abel, and what happened to them both, and where Cain went. And we won't be leaving out Seth either in his lineage, but there, I didn't put down all of my thoughts around the series, but it's something else that can trigger an audience to be receptive to more of what's coming in the game. Same along the lines, relative, same narrative, but different aspect of it is, taking, I borrowed the title from one of my favorite movies, which is All About Eve, the original. But this is sort of more female oriented, more feminine oriented. Sex and the City meets How to Get Away with Murder, as well as sort of a
Modern day
conceptual.
version of How to Get Away with Murder. As you-
And I have some other ideas for Dionysus versus Saint Germain and who they represented and were reincarnated through history, and did they work together? Did they not work together? Are they one and the same? You can explore a lot of interdimensionality from a limited 3D narrative within that story. So,
and there's a ton more that we have that we kind of left off the chopping block, things that, like about Zeus and the Titans, things about, God versus Satan and the original battle, like there's so much of this from the past, going back to that map, the past and the future that can be told, either a scripted, unscripted, or documentary, which is kind of how we broke this out here. I'll let Chris keep going on the unscripted, but all of this can be designed around how we want to tell the story of the past, present, and future. These are ideas that we had, or at least some of the best ideas that we had. We've got a ton of others if we feel so inclined, but we focus this again mostly just on the war for humanity.
yeah. So again, a handful of unscripted ideas to sort of round out some of these offerings. Some of them are based on books. Some of them are, Immortality Through Archaeochemistry is the series that's going to examine work affiliated with a book that came out a couple years ago called The Immortality Key, which is the secret history of the religion with no name, which essentially dives in and looks at the ancient cult of Dionysus and Eleusis, and how pre-Paleo Christianity and all religions were dependent on psychotropics and other psychedelics throughout time, and what that means for ancient humanity and how it has informed the way that we view ourselves, and in some ways prevents us from viewing ourselves holistically. So it's an exploration in that. It will bring up and expose a lot of different things. I would say it's in line with the immense success of the current Netflix docuseries called Archaeology Apocalypse with Graham Hancock that came out about 2 weeks ago, which is setting the world on fire and is absolutely pissed off academia and archaeology, because I think Graham is right over the target. And as we all know, academia doesn't like to be told when they're wrong. So there is I'd say there is a very high receptivity culturally for this type of content, and a real-time comp is in the works right now and running on Netflix. And it's something that's never really been created and shoved out the way that it has. Much to the same, I would say, doing something around psionic geometry, musical harmonics, with Eric Rankin, or at least picking up on what his studies have done, and joining that with Dionysus in the creation of music and ecstasy overlays nicely. And it also starts to let humanity start to understand that everything is about frequency and vibration, and that all things revolve around frequency and vibration, especially when we go interdimensional. So it's sort of a foundational narrative for people to start to get the very basics around what's coming.
I really like that idea. I really
Yeah.
like that idea, Chris. And I think the Neptunians would love it too. And
Yeah.
it plays into the music.
hmm And there's also some other arenas like the modern day Royal, you know, obviously in addition to the other ideas we've had, like the Maynards of Laurel Canyon. But, you know, I mean, what's it like to be a royal? This gives us an opportunity to present Prince as Prince Imran and let him build a brand around who he is, around a show that, you know, it is culturally sensitive to where culture is, and can lead to the Maynards of Laurel Canyon once Dionysus is revealed. This gives us a way to build his brand in real time today, you know, or in the near future, as opposed to waiting until Dionysus is mainstream known. The Truth is Stranger is also, you know, taking an example of Emery, but there's a bajillion people that you could do it with, where you take, you know, people who are related to the disclosure movement and go explore some of these things like Graham Hancock did on the Apocalypse show, and explore what's true about aliens. You know, it's about planting these seeds of what we're talking about in these stories in ways that people can get behind, so that you've got all of these seeds planted. So by the time the game comes out and the quests are happening, the war for humanity makes sense, and it's not
Wow.
completely
Yeah.
foreign.
Right.
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 All this stuff starts to collapse on itself in a good way and combine into one, if you will,
Right.
even though this is
Right.
all disparate parts right now for the first few years, let's just call it.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that every time Adam jumps, he does it to music.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, I mean, and it provides, listen, in a very 3D limited way, it also provides enormous opportunity for revenue and things like that too, the music elements of all of this. So-
Royalties, exactly.
And then with creating
Licensing.
your own record label, you own all of this, you have the IP, you can redistribute it and basically license it back out to yourselves in other manifestations as we start to continue to build the ecosystem. There's a lot of sort of incestuous revenue creation that Tori and I can get into at a later date, that once this world is set up appropriately, can start to even maybe wash its face.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
The other thing here is some other documentary ideas, and I won't belabor this. One is called the Mozart Code, which I am personally a writer and producer of, based on an individual that I know well, who has found hidden encoded messages within Mozart's work, starting with K428. He discovered this while he was getting his doctorate of music's degree at USC, and discovered this, presented it in his doctoral thesis, and literally blew away the music department at SC, and they didn't even have any words. So it jumps from there that some of the best and brightest of humanity who have ever lived have all been participating in encoding the same type of information over and over again based on their preference of art, whether that's literature, music, architecture. All the same principles have been embedded and encoded into these, the best and brightest through all of time. Mozart just being one of them. And really, the Mozart Code documentary is a exploration into symbology across time, using Mozart in this discovery that no one knows about as the jumping off point. And not only did Mozart encode one thing, he encoded just even 4 elements that haven't been picked up on in that one quartet, meaning K428. It's a huge revolutionary discovery within music. The USC music department has absolutely lost its mind a few years ago when he revealed it.
Yeah.
So it's another interesting way to develop, share certain information that is usually hard to do, but with a vital and new informative narrative.
Especially given that Mozart was a Mason, right?
Well, we already think of him as being brilliant, but he was even more brilliant than we give him credit for.
Mhm. Yeah.
Secret Architects of Western Civilization. This is taking different literature and works that have been overlooked and not talked about, and reviewing them and reconstituting them and figuring out what they were saying and how that has missed the narrative of humanity throughout time, and can bring more education to certain aspects of the wider narrative that the order is trying to express. The same goes with, the last two here, Zeus and the Titans, and Jim Morrison and Dionysus. These are all thematically
They're just telling the
similar,
stories that
and
haven't
they're
been
just telling
told.
different stories for different
Yeah.
segments of the population who may not be hip to everything that we're saying before this.
Especially because it's important to connect Jim Morrison and Dionysus as the last incarnation, so that as we build Prince's brand as Prince Imran, and as we build the Dionysus brand, eventually we can reveal that Prince Imran is this incarnation of Dionysus. It makes it easier when you've already tied Jim Morrison to Dionysus. It's easier when you've explained Zeus and the Titans and how Dionysus came to be. These are all things that are not really well told in media, so they need to be, to plant the seed for the story. And in the future, we kind of, this is the last little bit, future strategic, and there's kind of, 4 different paths we can go from here.
Yeah, I'd say, I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah,
I'd
go for it.
say that the most important thing to move forward with immediately is a solidified framework, a codex, a definitive source material of the 4 books or the 5 books that exist. So combining them into one codified codex that is a memorialization of all the source material, because as a standalone, we still live in a 3D world where if you've written a book, then it matters in terms of moving things forward, at least commercially, from a content perspective. I don't know why that's still the way it is, but it is the way it is. So having that definitive source material combined, edited, and done is going to go a very long way in kicking off and establishing the groundwork for everything else that we've sort of reviewed thus far. So we need to sort of examine that, figure out a very high profile and experienced writer to come in and do that, and really being able to set the foundation for many more things to come. The other thing I would add, that moving into the future, and that the timing is right for this, even though you guys probably already know that, is there is a handful of current properties that are out there that are doing very well, that mirror and are similar in scope to everything that we're discussing today. Obviously, Black Adam has been a fairly big success in the theaters, and that came from the DC world and had an audience. So it has done well because they've been able to bring that audience to theaters. There is a animated show that is going to be on Fox starting in the spring called Kleptocracy, which is all about the Greek gods creating the first big city and civilization. It's Simpson-esque. The creator of it is Rick and Morty's creator, and it's sort of a fun excuse me, animated take on the gods and titans of Greece and how they created Western civilization. That's coming in the spring. There's also, as I mentioned, the Netflix series Archaeology Apocalypse, which is blowing the doors off and is top 2 or 3 in pretty much all the major Western English-speaking countries. And it's the top 10 in other non-English speaking countries as well. So that is something to take note of, showing the temperature and the willingness to accept those types of narratives, which I think is hugely important. And the other Oh, I think I already mentioned the other one that was interested or interesting, and I think that dovetailed into a lot of what Adam's jump reports get into is obviously the series on Amazon called Peripheral. So, and listen, there's more out there. I'm not trying to say that that's an exhaustive list. That's just 3 or 4 things that have popped up on my radar literally in the last 30 to 60 days that speak directly to various narratives that we're all discussing today that the order would like to impart.
Yep. So that's it.
That's it for today.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yay.
Yes, Dan, if you'll give me a minute. Thank you so much, Tori, and Chris. Just on our end, we have to say that there's a few of us just say hello, hi.
Hello,
Just-
guys. Hey, guys.
Yeah, so
Hi.
it's extraordinary, and I think everybody else that's going to be looking at this, I feel just a visceral, energetic reaction initially is just one of just wanting to congratulate you all on a really well thought out and brilliantly structured and executed plan thus far. And now we'll get off the phone, but you are going to send us a copy of this, obviously.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, you guys can get into it. And remember, we spoke at lunch, but for the wider group here,
Yes.
the more control you have, meaning the more you can pay for, the more resources you can extend to various aspects of this agenda, the more control and ownership you will have over your IP.
Which means you get to have the say over how it gets executed,
Right.
which is really important for the
Especially for, I would assume, for the order to get across specifics the way that they want to get it across. You cannot leave that in the hands to a bunch of moronic entertainment executives at a studio or a streaming service, because they're a bunch of fucking morons. So the more resources you can bring to any of this, the more control you will have and the more you will own it. And
the more money
that
you
will,
make as a
and the more
byproduct.
money you will make in the long run. But, and there's a lot of ways that you can go about doing that. But in general, that's maybe something you should keep in the back of your mind as you move forward.
Well, this whole thing started when these people invited me to a wonderful 10-day thing in Maui. And in 2022, on November 11th, believe it or not, 2002, way back then, And then we were introduced, Mr. Perrin and I were introduced, I believe, in 2006. And it's been a wonderful journey, and on a, like you said, you've got 2 levels. There's the sort of esoteric or spiritual side of, this time and space, and man's exploration of spirituality has been one of mankind's greatest pursuits historically. And then you've got, this wonderful future that can be created through bringing people on board for true ecstasy, true divine ecstasy, which is, compassion, kindness, empathy, love, So with that, I just want to, again, thank you all for what you're doing, and looking forward to, really speaking with Mr. Perrin and all of our folks with, on Team America, and everybody will be taking a look at it. And then we'll all come to, a very, everybody must be enthusiastic about whatever they take on. So with you two being the creatives in charge, your enthusiasm will be the greatest barometer. So we look forward to it all. And thank you, and say hello to everybody. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Absolutely.
Let's turn our slide. So. No.
Okay, Adam?
Okay, gang.
So is along the lines of what you're talking about, Chris, obviously, the control of the IP, the enhanced revenue opportunities, those are in and of themselves important. But the thing that I need some help with is what are the scope of resources we're talking about here? And what are the phases? And Tori, is there anything that you want to mention about, where we would take this or what you're thinking about? Assuming that, assuming that we went out and got these resources, what are we talking about in terms of, the amount and what are the phases? And how do you guys fit into that?
Well, I'll take
let
it.
Chris tackle the first part and then I'll pick up after that.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, like a lot of things, you can skin the cat a lot of different ways. However, I'd say a lot in the first phase can start to happen simultaneously, meaning like the whole idea of the game needs to start in development, even though you may not see it for a year and a
As
half
does
or
the
2
book
years.
writing.
As
and
is the book, right? So a few
world
things.
building.
So a few things can start, I think, all at once. I think the Atom Group can be developed. That might even be saleable without
Without
having to
any
put
of
your
the
own
rest of it.
money. But I mean, then now you're playing 50-50 with the streamer or whatever, and the showrunner. We have to get a good showrunner involved that's going to make this saleable, blah, 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 blah. So I would say the most important thing, and Tori can disagree with me, I don't think she does, is to go find a great writer
Mhm.
to write the world. She needs to create your source material based on your jump reports, but it
Mhm.
needs to be a collective codified vision.
And I also
Right.
think I think we also need an illustrator.
Yes.
Someone who could then take what that writer writes and turn it into very similar to the vibe stuff that we created as a marker so that you can actually see the world.
Yeah. And that's going to be helpful in pitching all this stuff down the road to anyone that we bring in, whether or not they are related to the order, care about the order. It doesn't matter. It's like, hey, we have a job for you. We want to hire you third party. Here's what you need to know. Read this, go do what we hired you to do. So
That's phase
it's-
one.
That's phase one. So identifying that individual who's going to probably take close to, 7 or 8 months at least to go through this, to rewrite it, to present it, and
And
to get,
to develop it.
and we're going to want a writer who has some credibility within the industry. So when this is done, we're going to get people to look at it and take note of it and treat it with some decency and respect based on who was a co-creator of it. So I would say that needs to happen like day one. I think we can start to develop the Atom Group and play around with that and figure out what we want to do with that. That can happen simultaneously. And then probably the fundamental, underpinnings of how we get the game
Well, I think
going.
the
Tori
game
can
is
probably be
actually-
really helpful with that.
The game, I think, is actually far easier than trying to go from a content perspective, because gaming doesn't really have, especially in the VR space, it's not like you really have a whole lot of competition. I have a colleague who's built the best VR games with the best studio IP. So we already have those relationships. I think, but it's about building the world. You've got to build the world first before you can even think about gamifying the game. So what Chris said is logical step one. I think that's going to cost you probably what, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the writer. And
Over the next year.
2 years, yeah, year and a half. Yeah.
And the game will probably cost anywhere from, depending on how you do it, how intense you do it, the game's probably going to cost anywhere from 2.5 to 5, depending on how crazy you get. And then you're probably going to want to throw an extra, 3.5 to 5 at marketing.
So I'd say, Adam, over the next 5 to 7 years, you're looking at $5 to $7 million or something like that, if you want to look at it. I mean, listen, I haven't gone and
Crunch the numbers.
this is all off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, no, I get that. This is a horseback answer.
But I mean,
and
I'd
that's okay.
say, I'd say, hey, let's go. I mean, and Tori and I, in fairness, have talked about a couple writers potentially, but you know, we haven't been paid to do that. We haven't talked to you. I mean, it's limited in terms of, but we would go out, we'd interview people, we'd see their availability, we'd see their receptivity, we'd figure out what other things they've done that is similar, not similar, what kind of bang for your bucks literally are you going to get when you pay a writer $500,000 or more? Because here's the thing, Adam, you're not coming from the DC world. We're not coming from a world where there is
Have an
a
audience.
proven track record where, hey, go write Black Adam because there's an audience and it's going to get made and it's going to go look good on your resume as a
Yeah,
writer.
the world already exists because you've got, you know, decades of comic books.
Right. So what we're going to need to do in this case is you're going to have to make the painful decision in some ways to pay fair market price for a writer that is of high caliber, that is going to get you to where you need to go in the next phases, in just creating the foundation of everything.
Okay, so
And-
is the 5 to 7 million plus another 5 for the marketing for the game, does that include the development of the Atom Group show?
Yeah, I could.
Yeah, it could, because the development for the Atom Group show isn't really going to take that much because it's not, doesn't require the intense world building. Like it's not that hard to develop a reality TV show, you know, or even a scripted TV show. It's fairly
We have
one
to package
show.
that. Tori and I need to find the right people to come in that are going to
Showrunner.
be, who are
Yeah.
going to show up and get
Package it.
approved to go do it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
even if you're bringing money, or at least we could represent that you're bringing money, it'll go further in terms of our
Ownership.
ability to negotiate more effectively, even though you may not even need to spend a dime, so to speak, on the Atom Group beyond pitch materials and development to go into a Netflix or a network or anywhere else. Or we could say to Netflix, never mind, we can pay for the whole thing where you guys just distribute.
Yeah.
And they may say, yeah, great, we're entertaining stuff like that right now. Or Netflix may say, no, we're paying for everything ourselves because we want to own the most of it, but we really like this idea. We're willing to move forward with it in a co-production.
And
I
then
don't
of course, as the studio comes together, that becomes an option for distribution too.
Right. So yeah, Adam, that can include that. I mean, listen, we're both speaking out of school here a little bit, so we're really ballparking these numbers, but there is going to be the biggest ticket item here is to find a valued writer that's going to give you credibility where none exists in the space that you want to move into.
Mhm.
Because this isn't
Yeah,
coming from a pre-existing world yet.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like
And-
saying you want to build a restaurant and everybody's like,
Well,
well,
who's the chef?
know,
Yeah.
yeah, who's the chef? What's it gonna serve?
Right.
And you come in with what you just said, and they're like, what?
Yeah, it's
So-
like
I would say
your
for
chef
Tori
wants-
and I, our process in this, the way I would envision it is Tori and I are sort of the grand architects.
yeah,
We're the producer of the producers
yeah.
for what the order wants to extract and present to humanity.
Okay, so what I would like you guys to do is something that is not very complicated, but you're in a much better position than I to do it. I would like a timeline with how much money is going to be needed when to achieve, the
Outline goals that we presented today.
yes.
Okay.
And
Yeah, we can do that.
specifically the game and Atom Group, right?
And the book.
Uh,
And then
Yeah.
obviously the books.
Yeah, I mean, those three things, and then, based on a successful, experience around these things, in the timeline, add the music element,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Oh yeah, setting up your
Because-
record label, Adam, is easy. We can set up
Yeah.
a record label yesterday if you want.
Yeah, and there's some costs obviously with you know bringing musicians in and paying the band and all of that.
The
And
most
and-
important thing is producing, like having a good
Right.
producer.
Okay, and then the second part of it is, you know, what the timeline for the first movie would be. You know, after all of this, really the hardest work is completed if it's successful.
Okay, we can do
Okay.
that.
We can do that, yeah.
And I thought your by the way, it's very strange to hear your story back at you. I can tell you that because this never happened. But I really thought you did a great job on that, Tori. And I love some of those phrases you used. You know, the war for humanity obviously is very appealing. And then you called it the war of secrets. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, there's some of those subtitles that come after the war for
Yeah.
humanity is pretty well. We listened to it again. I mean, I think they're going to end up being, you know, it'll King Adam's War for Humanity, and then whatever titles you said for
Yeah.
each of those phases. But anyway, that's great news.
Did you like
So at
what you
least
heard
we-
at least initially? I mean, is your
No, I
immediate-
did.
Okay.
I trust me, I would tell you if I didn't.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, you need to look. I mean, I know you've been driving or whatever you're doing.
No,
so-
I was watching. I saw all of the images you put up, and I
Okay, cool.
was following the 6 phases and stuff because what we're really talking about is the hardest part, I think, is going to be the educating of
Yeah.
the educating of the population to be able to even have a baseline to understand the story.
Yep.
And the way that you're presenting it, you know, Bart Simpson meets Deadpool thing in a lobbyist comedy thing in The Office. I mean, I think that's just, it gives you such an easy way to introduce these concepts.
Without it having to be 50 shows. You know,
Yeah,
like,
I know, I
yes,
know,
the
I
50
know.
shows are good and it we should continue to explore those things like in the map with the past and the present and the future. But even if you just did the Atom group, that's enough of a precursor for the video game to be effective.
Yeah, and
in-
the two
in
of them,
watching
and
and
then the books with the video game, and then the
Yeah,
movie would come naturally.
yeah. They're all designed to be that way so that it's order. You've got a quest, then you get a book, then you get a movie, then you get a new quest, then you get a new book, then you get a new movie. Rinse, wash, repeat. Awesome.
So what do you think the odds of this playing out as you guys have laid out, if we have the proper
Funding.
Yeah.
I feel pretty. I mean,
Well, to go find a writer, I don't think is very hard.
no.
People want work, and if you're willing to pay their full freight, I mean, their real fee or close to it, I don't think it's hard. It's just about availability. Did we find the right person and are they available?
Mhm.
And then how long are they going to take to use? They need 5 months, 12 months, like who knows? So that I think we could get done within, I mean, at least we could identify half a dozen people to go and engage their agent or whomever their representation with you know, an offer and, you know, talk to them, facilitate it, try to figure out what's going on. Would they be interested in doing this? Can we make a deal? You know, and then to go negotiate the deal with all the terms and get them going and being available.
and
for it.
they would no doubt have to read the book, Stephen,
Well, here,
at
Tori
least
and I have
some
been
of them.
talking about that. Yeah, they're gonna have to read the books, but more importantly, probably a thought that Tori and I had, Adam, is to either come to you or you come to LA and to put you in a room with Tori and I, and even this person, the writer, and you tell the story chronologically based on the books, real time.
Yeah, I think that for them, for the writer to
'Cause
get
they're
it
gonna-
right, yeah,
They're gonna want to
have
ask you
yeah.
questions. They're gonna want
No,
to
I
get
know,
the
I know.
nuances.
They're gonna
What
want
was
to know
I
your
know, I know.
personality. They're gonna want to hear you tell it, you
Yeah.
know, from
So
your.
I
that's
know.
one way to do that, that I think is really effective, and you're living and breathing, and that, can go a long way, and they can hear it firsthand. And then now they're being impacted physically with your presence, your energy, and hearing it. And then once they download that, read everything based on everything else that Tori and I can give them and talk to them about, then they can start to go do a draft.
Yeah, and they can it just re-emphasizes what's in the jump reports. It's like,
Yeah.
I think it'll be
It's
really
just it's just more of a cohesive narrative of all of it because here's the other thing, Adam, we go write the book, it's going to be worth something at some point. Like that's IP that you guys will own,
Yeah.
the order will own, or whatever the entity is that starts to own all of this stuff, right? So
Yeah,
it's not like
it's called the Great Device Company.
okay,
But,
whatever it is that we set all
yeah.
this up under, just know that even in writing it, even though it's going to be a useful tool for everyone else coming into proximity of this project in perpetuity, like down the road, it will always be the most relevant thing for someone to get up to speed with. It's also something that we can eventually put out that people will want to buy. I don't think people are going to want to buy it day one because no one's going to really know what
Yeah,
it is.
right.
But
well, that's why you build it into the game,
Right.
right?
correct. And then
It's
once other
part of the
things start
hobby.
to become more interesting and more successful, you point back to the source material. People are going to want to acquire that.
Mhm.
Okay,
And we can even go make different iterations of the book too, Adam, in the future. We can do the coffee table version. We can do the graphic novel version. We can go do a picture version. We can do all kinds of fun stuff with the book in different iterations. Just like your jump reports are going to take on a new life as they get released into the public based on gameplay.
okay, so the elevator speech around the writer is essentially it will fill in the gaps that are inherent in the jump reports in a way that will make or build the world in a more accessible manner for most people.
Well,
Yeah, they're
listen,
gonna
I would relate it, Adam. I mean, simply put, ironically or unironically, it's no different than the Bible. The Bible isn't source material, right? It isn't source material. So it's a bunch of other books and other material combined into one book that serves its purpose and narrative for a larger swath of humanity. We're doing the same thing with your jump reports. We're just combining it into its own Bible.
And
So there's a more of a
whole point-
cohesive allegory and theological narrative that goes along with the order's agenda.
And the whole point of the writer is to be able to take the gems of what you give in a jump report and what you talk about and turn it into this massive world that people can visualize as they read it.
Right.
So that they can understand all of the nuances about every single character that you ever mentioned. What do these weapons look like? How do they operate? What is it? How does it function? All of those things that you don't get from just reading the jump report, or that you won't get from just even you talking about it, but they'll take it and they'll use their creativity to create versions of it that build out the world in full color.
Right.
Okay, I get it.
It gives context to your experiences
Yes.
beyond what's currently written down.
Yes.
All right. So
So we need to find, so in your case right now, based on what you guys want to achieve from the order's perspective, as far as I can tell, we need to go find a high profile writer.
Yep.
to write this. So at least as we start to go out and talk about this, and, you know, and part of this next phase would obviously be going to lawyers and all of this stuff. We can dine out, quote unquote, dine out on the fact that XYZ Joe Smith writer, who is responsible for these properties already, is now writing your version of source material.
And then it's gonna be the basis of the gameplay, and then there's this whole
Right,
interactive
right.
component. Like, that's gonna get people really excited. And
So, do you think that at the stage of the writer, we should also bring in, I mean, I don't want to be like dreaming in color here, but Halo is an epic series that I watched, even though I've never played the game. And I mean, should we have some video game guys in the mix with this writer?
Yeah, we could bring in a development executive or, you know, independent third-party development consultation for gaming to create that simultaneously. Or maybe the writer we find has also written for games and could do something double or, you know, an extension or an addendum thereof of the book itself.
I
don't
actually
know.
have a writer.
I'd
I
rather
actually have
have two separate, a game writer and a other writer,
Well,
but
they're very different applications, right? So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that you could include the writer from the gaming component if you wanted to. I don't think that it's a bad idea, but I think that it's good to have a little bit of space, because the game has to be creative on a whole nother level, because it's really about the gameplay. It's really about the Easter eggs and splitting up the marketing. And I know that most of that's probably going to come from us, because I don't know that there really are many people that know how to do this well. But, and so Chris and I will probably have to do a lot of hand holding, but having a good game producer, development executive, writer, you know, can come in conjunction with or after the world is built. And I would be okay with it after the world was built, if we had to. Because I think
I would just like to maybe include them along the way so that there's
Sure.
not some like huge issue that they see that I don't think there
well,
will
they're
be,
different
but
properties, so I mean, ultimately, it won't really matter.
I see. Okay.
You know, because the book is going to get released as a part of the marketing of the game. Like, the game is kind
Right.
of its own ecosystem.
Right.
In some ways, Adam, you know, we can talk about this in the future too. Do we want to be so overt in what we're creating and really show our hand that all this stuff is interconnected? Or do we let, quote unquote, the public discover this on their own?
They have to
Which is-
discover it on their own.
Which is far more valuable.
They have to discover it on their own.
Right.
You know, the best propaganda is subtle.
Yes.
Hidden in
Yes.
plain sight.
Yeah. No question about it. All right, look, my head hurts. I'm tired and I wrote this motherfucker and I'm, you know, what? Just wow. So I need a break. I know probably everybody else does.
Yeah.
But you know, well done. Please send me, you know, the financing plan
Yep.
for the content, for the art. And by the way, Queen Oka Wakawee. So it's Oka Wakawee.
Okay. Yeah.
Did we
Yeah.
spell it wrong?
It's spelled
No,
different.
no. It's just pronounced in those symbols. Oka Wakawee.
Got it. Oka Woka
Okay.
Waka.
Oka Wakawee. Yeah. Okay, great.
Awesome.
All right.
right.
Well, we'll go download, digest, and
Yeah,
then come back to us.
exactly.
We'll get this
Thank
other
you.
part done in the next day or so.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks,
thank you.
guys.
Okay, gang.
All right.
Appreciate
Yep.
you.
Well done.
Bye.
Bye-bye.